So freedom itself was attacked on that day. Freedom itself was attacked this morning by a faceless coward. And freedom will be defended. It's George W. Bush on September 11th. So after 9/11, for the war on terror, Baby Bush started his own doctrine of preemptive warfare. Right? It's when America became proudly the American empire. We're allowed to attack any little country. Nobody's going to stop us. No one's going to do shit. We're the lone superpower, which means there is a superpower. There isn't a superpower because we're the lone one. We're the Leviathan, and nobody else needs to check anybody else. But who checks the Leviathan? Right? Who checks the empire? Of course, empires don't work. Civilizations come and go, but an empire who tries to take over everybody, who's going to like that? The Roman Empire actually was able to save themselves by adopting those occupied territories as citizens, so therefore you would enjoy the benefits of citizenship, whatever that meant. But it was something, unlike the Philippines or the I don't know. There's some of the Bahamas, not Costa Rica, but you got Guam, Puerto Rico, and Guam. Right? They're just being occupied. They're not citizens. They're not states of America. They're an occupation. They're one of our colonies. And when it became apparent that Saddam Hussein didn't have any weapons of mass destruction, the emphasis of the war changed from self-defense to freedom and democracy. The child is wicked because he is weak. Okay, I don't know. Part of me is like, let the fucking parents beat up their fucking kids and just ruin their own fucking lineage and their own, if they're that fucking retarded and stupid. And I apologize for using that, but really, they are. They're socially retarded. They're like backwards and shit, and they want to fuck up their kid and make their fucking kid backwards, and they use these fascist fucking tactics in order to get their way. So, a part of me says, fuck that lineage, that bloodline probably needs to just kind of die out, There's sort of like the Shakers, right, of Pleasant Hill. They were against sex, and then they all died out. So they were not smart enough to ever eventually realize that, sex is pleasurable, and there is a use to it. Nature has a purpose for it. Okay, so God might make it a sin or whatever the justification was for them to say that they would not have sex until their entire bloodlines ran out. So, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, just one of my favorite authors, who wrote Emile, right? E-M-I-L-E. The Abbé de Saint-Pierre called men big children. One could reciprocally call children little men. The propositions have the truth as sentiensis. Phrases as principles, they need clarification. When Hobbes called the wicked man a robust child, he said something absolutely contradictory. All wickedness comes from weakness. A child is wicked only because he is weak. Make him strong, he will be good. He who could do everything would never do harm. Of all the attributes of the all-powerful divinity, goodness is the one without which one can least conceive it. All peoples who have recognized the two principles have always regarded the bad as inferior to the good. If they had done otherwise, they would have been supposing something absurd. So, that's Jean-Jacques Rousseau saying when you make the child strong, give them a conscience, be able to decide for themselves, they will inevitably, their logical and their natural tendencies will go towards declaring that leading a good and virtuous life is the way to be. He's right on the money with that. Carrying on. So in order for nonviolence to work, says Stokely Carmichael of the Black Power movement, your opponent must have a conscience. The United States has none. If there's a country that has committed unspeakable atrocities in the world, it is the United States of America. They do not care for human beings. Nelson Mandela. In graduate school, the classroom became a place that I hated, says Bell Hooks, a educational theorist from Christian County, Kentucky. Yet a place where I struggled to claim and maintain the right to be an independent thinker. The university and the classroom began to feel more like a prison, a place of punishment and confinement rather than a place of promise and possibility. You even have Elizabeth Rogers who taking pictures. She takes pictures, mug shots of each and every one of her fucking students, so that way she has a file on them, their picture, their name, right? Well, this is who you are, like she's already starting a police file before she even knows them. Place of confinement instead of promise and possibility. My reaction to the stress and to the ever-present boredom and apathy that pervaded my classes was to imagine ways that teaching and the learning experience could be different. That was written in 1994. It's in a book called Teaching to Transgress. A new scientific truth does not triumph by convincing its opponents and making them see the light, but rather because its opponents eventually die and a new generation grows up that is familiar with it. Planck. I think it's Max Planck. So that's a profound, basically that's saying I'm going to win no matter what. You can't stop a good idea, especially a good idea whose time has come. U of L, the gay students at U of L tried to stop gay marriage from happening, but the gay students at U of L had failed because of Jack Conway, who's trying to become our next governor, okay? And he seems pretty promising, to be honest with you. Came real close to becoming senator, been attorney general for a long time, been running Kentucky. I haven't seen or heard about too many crazy, nothing like a massive crazy spell, just kind of pockets of craziness, nothing that's too drastic. So we'll see what happens. Jack Conway's announced his candidacy. So most of my professors were not the slightest bit interested in enlightenment. They did not give a shit. More than anything, they seemed enthralled by the exercise of power and authority within their own mini kingdom, the classroom. In the last analysis, we ourselves are part of nature and therefore part of the mystery that we are trying to solve. I wanted to do more public speaking at my very expensive American teacher training school and to work on PowerPoints for my social studies classes I knew I would be teaching eventually. So these are my own ideas. They said, how do you want to become a teacher? How do you want to teach yourself to become a teacher? Well, I'm going to have to learn how to publicly speak, so I'm going to have to start articulating. And then when I can articulate enough and sort of develop enough of a narrative, then I can take that narrative and then apply it to whatever field that I'm in. So I need to do more public speaking, and then I need to do more PowerPoints, because in a prepared teacher, that's a classroom management tactic. If I can be like, hey, War of 1812, and then the American Revolution, and then King George's War, and then Tecumseh's War, and then Blue Jacket. If I can, basically just boom, one after another, here's a big idea, here's a big concept, and break, take a breath, so that way other people can talk and respond, because it is a group discussion. So really, I think just my soul, just my heartbeat being in the classroom will just kind of change the entire, environment, the way the environment feels. It won't feel like someone's just breathing down your neck like a, fire-breathing witch dragon, one of those dragon witches. They get combined. They were like, I don't know how it was genetic or if it was natural, but like, it's rough out here, man. So I want to do more public speaking. Am I expensive? I want to teach eventually. Nobody ever consulted me about what I want to learn. Instead, I freaked out for 2 years, hurriedly doing my work, and with most of my efforts focused on clinging onto a thread of dignity. It was a fucking oppressive time. It was fucking rough and bullshit. And I convinced myself that they did give a shit about me, so therefore they have some words of truth. But then I started thinking, well, no, they don't give a shit about me if they're just manipulating me, So, yeah, and that's unfortunate. Education should not be oppressive. It should be liberating. Education should be a lot of things, okay? John Locke, he even said that basically kids are learning. I taught my younger brother chess at 5 years old. So education is many things. First of all, it's just kind of teaching them skills so they can get a job. At the very least, education should do that. That's the very least. A vocational, teach a welding, teach a skill. I did all this fucking bullshit, education at Spalding University in the education department, but they don't teach any fucking thing at all. They teach nothing. I walk away with no skills. If you learn welding, even if, like, I don't know, something, you wasn't able to pay for classes, so you had to get kicked out in the middle of the class, you would still know the skills that you had learned, right? So if they learned a trade, if you learned a skill, you would actually have some sort of sort of a tiny notion or inkling of a clue of maybe having a trade that you can get a job and get some work done. The Spalding University with this fucking elitist, aristocratic type of collegiate ivory tower. I'm better. I'm snobby and snooty. Classroom management oppressed. You know, I'm a rock star. Bullshit is just, it's fucking too much. It's too much. Especially when they ain't a rock star and they're fucking losers. You know, like fucking stupid. If you're an oppressive fucking piece of shit and you can't even empathize, there's benevolent dictators. My first teacher at Spalding University was Amanda Wyrick, and she was a dictator. She was a professor oppressor, right? Whatever she said goes, and because she was the dictating force, she sort of, it was a Hunger Games, what's that Chinese version of Hunger Games? Battle Royale sort of fight for her love. And because, you know, I understand what she was doing, and I enjoyed her class, and I learned a lot. But I couldn't discern really. I couldn't question her authority because I liked looking at her. She was really attractive, and I remember her bending over one time to pick something up, and I was like, over. It was over for me. And so, you know, it will have to come from the women to be able to really stand up to other female dictators. You know, I think it could be, I don't know, it could be too rough, but it's also sort of, it makes sense in a way, in a caveman-ish way, because, you know, like, I have to be oppressed by somebody that's like so much weaker than me, you know, and that's even, just oppression by itself is bad, but it seems like doubly worse. And like I said, she was a benevolent dictator, and so I appreciate the class. I remember learning a lot of stuff, but I didn't appreciate the oppression. So the anti-democracy, and there was arguments, and I didn't really make other friends with other people. It seems as though because I was speaking, they hated me when I was speaking to inform the class and share with the class so I can learn with other people. But instead, they just want to be like judging me and hating on me because I was actually participating in class, whereas they just want to stay silent and not say shit. While I was there to learn, I wanted to speak, I wanted to have dialogue and conversations. St. John's College, that's all they would do actually. You read your own books, come to class, the teacher doesn't say shit and just kind of administers and watches them. If they need a conversation starter, then the advisor, they don't even call them teachers or professors, they call them advisors, will sort of, you know, prompt them. So education is many things, you know, at the very least teach their vocation, but it's also sort of teaching their morality, who the people are. So it should be useful, it should be meaningful, it should consolidate your autonomy, it should make you feel like a more of a person, your independence, your sovereignty. Education in America is not liberating, not even at a liberal arts institution. In college, the universities, high schools, middle, elementary, kindergarten, Head Start programs, from the very bottom all the way to the top, oppression is the name of the game. My proposal is to counter this toxic environment of fascist, autocratic, totalitarian dictatorships. And what I propose to put in its place is something very simple, very honest and fair. And I propose that we as a people, staff, parents, children, community, city, state, country, and world, dedicate ourselves to the fight for freedom, justice, democracy, peace, and humanity. So start allowing our morals and our principles guide us, have a moral core, and that's where our actions stem from. And then our dignity and our value for ourselves is when those ideas turns into actions, and people are helped when, you know, if that's what your thing is. But for humanity, you know, think globally but act locally. So we're saving the whole world here, but how does raising a garden save the world? Well, you know, it's, you know, people are starting to raise food for themselves and they're not dependent on these corporations. So that's just one example. So that's, yeah, so there's oppression and dictatorships, fascism at all these institutions, and I want some democracy. I want to be able to have freedom and justice so people can start having the dialogue. Even if you just whisper, my God, if you just whisper, even in college, they're like, hey, stop whispering. It's like, even in church, I could at least lean in and whisper to somebody. It doesn't have to be like, hey, you know, if I whisper quiet enough to where you can't hear it, and it's just some short little message, who are you to sit there and be a fucking dick to me? If I just do it real quick and you can't even understand or hear about it, get the fuck out of here. I'm allowed to do that. So I think it only makes sense to identify the structures of authority and to question it, and if it's illegitimate, then to dismantle it. It's a Noam Chomsky quote. And more on Beekman's World, on Johnny's World. Right. Okay.